So we're looking at phylum Mollusca. Now, this is one of the largest groups in the ocean. Contains a lot of things that you're familiar with and some things that you're not. And you'll probably wonder, why are these things related to one another? They don't look anything like each other. It'll have to do with their key feature as always. So here in phylum Mollusca, there are some things that, like I said, you are probably going to recognize. Things like snails and slug, shellfish, squid and octopus, plus a couple weird ones. There are four main classes. There's actually a total of nine, but this is one of the ones where we just don't have the time to go through all of them. So the four main ones, and these are the four big ones, are Gastropoda, Polyplacophora, Bivalvia, and Cephalopoda or Cephalopoda, depending on how you pronounce it. Now, how big is this group? Well, it's gigantic. This group contains over 100,000 different kinds of species. This is the second largest phylum behind insects. Insects come in at about 1 million different kinds of species. But as far as the ocean goes, this is the largest phylum in the ocean, which is kind of why we're breaking it up into two separate parts. Now, the key feature, as always, defines what belongs to this group. Now, for this group, all of them have something called a muscular foot. This doesn't mean that they work out and their, foot is all like, yoked out because they're lifting weights with it or anything. It just means that there's a part of them that is all muscle, which is typically the bottom, and they're all going to use it for movement of some sort. So in your notes, it's going to ask you to sketch 4 sketches: a marine snail, a chitin, a clam, and an octopus. These are just very generic. So like here, just draw like a very generic snail like this. Even Gary is fine. You can just draw like the little wiggly part at the bottom as the muscular foot. So you can pause and then unpause as you finish sketching. This is something called a chitin. The bottom part right here is its muscular foot. There's its mouth. So I know it looks like it's all like the same side. There's the mouth. That little hole right there, that's the anus on the other side. Then go ahead and sketch this for the clam. This thing's sticking out that looks like a tongue. That's its muscular foot. It's going to use it for digging. Finally, just a generic cartoon octopus, because I know these are kind of hard to draw. So generic cartoon octopus, or if you feel like drawing this one, you can totally do that. The foot is actually this bottom part right here, which you would call its arms. And these aren't tentacles, by the way. So we'll distinguish arm and tentacle in part 2. So next up, what kind of symmetry do they have? Well, they have bilateral symmetry. And if you're thinking like, wait, no, really? They do? This is easiest to see in like something like an octopus, or even like a snail. So like Gary, so if we come back here, Gary, you can't slice them this way and have the front and the back be the same. You can slice them right between the eyes and right between the shell, and then have the left and the right be the same. So with a clam, though, it's kind of weird. It's not as obvious with a clam. So let me show you this way. So when you typically look at a clam or an oyster, it's like you're looking at a human sideways. So if I cut the human this way, the front and the back are not the same. This is not bilateral symmetry this way. You have to turn it sideways so it's looking at you. So like right here, this human, like if you slice it right down the middle, there's an eye on the left and eye on the right. So with the clam, you have to turn it sideways like this. So when you slice it, look, there's a shell on the right or on the left, and then there's a shell on the right. It's balanced on each side. You can kind of see this. Like if you really look at the shell, like you can't cut it this way and have the left and the right be the same. It's not. This is especially obvious with the organs. So it has a lot of organs inside of there. If you were to slice it this way, notice that you would have like these things called siphons on this side, but they're not on this side. So in terms of bilateral symmetry, you have to turn it sideways. So like I said, if you slice it this way, the left and the right would be the same. All right, what about reproduction? How do they reproduce? Well, all phylum Mollusca reproduces sexually. So there's a union of sperm and egg. Now we're going to get into some weird like mating rituals between octopus and squid, but that's in part 2. For right now, I just need you to know, look, there's no more budding. Like if you remember like sea anemones, sponges, they could create these weird copies of themselves, and then they would fall off, and then boom, you got another one. Here, you don't see that anymore. There is no more asexual reproduction. Now you're starting to see separate genders as well. So there are some weird exceptions like land snails are hermaphroditic, but for the most part, in the marine environment, you have like male like a male octopus and a female octopus, a male squid and a female squid. They're less and less hermaphroditic. So we've seen that before, but you start seeing less and less of that as you move through evolution. All right, what about the nervous system? Now again, this is kind of where we're putting into two separate parts. For the most part, most of them have a small but more complex brain than worms. So snails have a slightly more complex brain than worms do. Now this gets really different when we start talking about squid and octopus, but that's why we're breaking it up into two separate parts. For right now, you can just say, look, the nervous system, a little bit more complicated than the worms were. What about digestion? So they're all going to feed using this thing called a radula. Now, once I get to the first class, I will talk about what the radula looks like. For right now, you can think about it like a tongue. It's weird. Again, a lot of stuff in the oceans is weird. Now, this has been modified for each group. So the radula works way different, okay, in each group. And I'm going to drop a clip in to show you like a really nasty snail. Like it's one of the baddest snails on the planet. You think like snails are wimpy. This is a bad snail. And it's modified its radula to act more like a harpoon. Really, really cool. But other than that, digestion kind of works like the same with you. They ingest through the mouth. It goes to the stomach. The stomach will break it down with enzymes. It heads to the intestines. The intestines extract nutrients, just like yours does. And then any extra waste will move out of the anus. It'll just poop it out. So there's this thing in the notes where like it's this little arrow. So just go ahead and fill these in to track it. So let's talk about classes. So here we have class Gastropoda. Now the key feature of this class is having one or no shell. This is really important. So anything that has one shell or doesn't have a shell. Now remember, muscular foot is the thing they all have. So first off, you have to have a muscular foot. If you have a muscular foot and you have one shell, you're Gastropoda. If you have a muscular foot and no shell, then you belong to Gastropoda. This happens to be the largest group of the phylum. It includes snails, slugs, nudibranchs, which are sea slugs, and these things called abalone, which I'll show you in a bit. And there are so many different kinds, and they're all like, weird and beautiful. You have these things called cowries. These are the ones with like incredibly smooth shells. Snails, they get incredibly large, by the way. Some of you are familiar with like garden snails. Like these are huge. You can keep them as pets. If you're wondering about this, just Google large snail pets. That really weird, really cool. You can see them eating like, whole things of lettuce. Just Google it and entertain yourself for a little bit. Here's just some more examples of just different kinds of sea snails. Like this is located here in California called a black turban snail. It's one of our native species. So again, notice they all have one shell. They all have a muscular foot that they're using for movement at the bottom. Now here you have these things called nudibranchs. Now nudibranchs have a muscular foot. They're kind of like Gary from SpongeBob. They use the bottom to move around, but they don't have a shell. Now what do they use for protection? Now things like our native species, the Spanish shawl here. Again, beautiful nudibranch. These guys have a really, really interesting ability. And so I'm going to drop in a quick video clip here to show you, well, how do they protect themselves if they don't even have a shell? And then here we have just a bunch of different nudibranchs. Again, all shellless gastropods. And some of them are kind of cute. Like they look like little bunnies. So here's a little snow bunny nudibranch. All right, what about feeding? So feeding in Gastropoda. So this is specific to Gastropoda. Now some of them are herbivores, meaning they only eat things like algae. Some of them are carnivores. You saw that snail clip, the one where the snail ate the fish. So yeah, they can be carnivores too. Some snails are gonna eat other animals. But they all use the radula for feeding. And again, different radulas are going to have different functions. Some of them use it for scraping. Some of them use it for drilling. Some of them use it for cutting. The video clip that you saw use it like a harpoon. Now this, if you have a chance, you can kind of, sketch this somewhere. Just kind of showing you the radula. I'll show you a video clip that you're going to have to fill into your notes. But I do want you to fill out some of the native species. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. So again, I'm going to show you them. It goes into this part of your notes. You can pause it, sketch, and then move on to the next one. So like this one's our black turban snail. Again, pretty common here in California. This one's our Pacific plate limpet. Again, also pretty common here in California. Here you have the red abalone. And so the native species, so again, shellless gastropods include our nudibranchs. These guys eat sea anemones, and again, they use their nematocysts for protection. And the reason why they're so brightly colored, it's basically, it's called asomatic coloration. They don't mind having this color because it's a warning coloration saying, hey, I'm dangerous. You might not want to eat me. You might not want to mess with me, because if you do, you're probably going to get poisoned. So the native species I need you to sketch in, again, just super quickly. We have our sea lemon nudibranch. Again, you can pause and sketch. And then our Spanish saw nudibranch. All right, so how does the radula work? Again, it is super weird. It's super funky. So just try to describe it the best you can in that little space that I left you in the notebook. So this thing, like I said, that is coming out right there, again, just try to do your best to describe that thing. It was actually just a great opportunity to show you the muscular foot as well. So this thing on the bottom, the little pad, that's its muscular foot that it's using for movement. And so here, just some snails eating. Again, they're using their radula to basically pull food in, kind of use that rasping tongue to tear it. It's just kind of gobbling up the lettuce there. There's another cool little shot. You can see the food going through its mouth, kind of up this way. And you can see the radula kind of coming out right there and chomping on the lettuce. All right, so the next group is class Polyplacophora. Poly means many, placo means shell or plate. Basically, these are things that have little plates on them. And what's really cool about this group is they all have the same number of plates. So first off, one, they all have a muscular foot. So they're phylum Molusca. How do they belong to this class? Well, all of them have 8 plates. These are more commonly known as chitons. Now, what about feeding in class Polyplacophora? Well, they're herbivorous or carnivorous. Okay, so they can, again, depends on the species. Some of them only eat algae. Some of them will eat other animals. Here we have those 8 plates. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're all going to have them. You flip them over to the other side, and you have this muscular foot. This is why they're in phylum Molusca. So first off, why are they in this phylum? Muscular foot. Why are they in this class? Why are they in Polyplacophora? It's because they have the 8 plates. So again, any chiton you pick up will have 8 plates on them. Now, the 2 that I want you to draw for this class is the line chiton. Pay attention to these little squares along the margin. So that's how you know you're looking at a line chiton. One, yeah, it has these little wavy lines and these little triangle shapes along with its 8 plates here. But these little squares along the margin are a dead giveaway for the line chiton. All right, what about the woody chiton? Woody chiton has like this olive green color. If you look at the margin, you don't see squares. You see little tiny dots along the margin. So go ahead and sketch this one. And then finally, for at least part 1, we're going to look at class Bivalvia. So these include shellfish. This is any organism with 2 shells. We call them valves, which is bivalvia, 2 shells. This includes clams, oysters, mussels, scallops. Again, anything with 2 shells belongs to this particular group. So again, why are they in this phylum? Well, they have a muscular foot. It kind of looks like this, kind of looks like a tongue. Why are they in this group, like this class? Bivalvia, well, they all have 2 shells on them. And they all, like I said, they all have internal organs. So like here's an oyster, if you've ever eaten an oyster, again, 2 shells. They have a muscular foot. Here's a mussel. So again, muscular foot in there. Here's a scallop. Normally when you eat scallops, you eat these things, but that's not its muscular foot. Its muscular foot is kind of right here. This is actually something called the adductor muscle. And they come in large, all sorts of shapes and sizes. They can get really, really small, all the way up to very, very large. Now, what about feeding in bivalves? They're all filter feeders. They feed on plankton. They pump water through a tube called the incurrent siphon, which brings water and plankton in. They eat that plankton, and then water and waste goes out of something called the excurrent siphon. Now, the two that I want you to draw for this one are the California mussel. Looks like this. You can go ahead and pause. And the Pacific geoduck. So these are relatively expensive here in California. If you've never had a chance to eat one or eat some, I highly recommend it. They're actually pretty good. I know they look disgusting. They look weird, and you're probably laughing as you're looking at it right now, but it is pretty good.